welcome to Something to Talk About. I don't think that I've been this excited to talk to a person in such a long time because not only is she a close personal friend of mine, but she's also got a really big fancy job. I'm going to be talking to Kate Baltazar, and if you know her, she's got a couple of really big fancy jobs. That's what we're going to talk about ahead on Something to Talk About. Welcome back to Something to Talk About. Today, of course, we are at King's Restaurant in Tamuning, and it's the launch of the Lenten season. I know it sounds like it's the launch of the football season, but that's not the case. And of course, our daily requirements, our dietary requirements are dictated to us by the Vatican. So here at King's, they are launching the Lenten menu, which you will find a number of things, including this, which we've just discovered is the seafood sampler. It's poke, it's bites of salmon and bites of parrotfish. OMG. Now,
Delicious.
I've got, yes, and so this is not a tattoo. If you are familiar with Catholicism, on Ash Wednesday, we receive ashes, and you were able to do that early, and so don't be distracted by the cross on her, on her forehead.
I didn't just change my tire.
Yeah, you did just change your tire, and she went like that. Well, it's so good to see you.
It is wonderful to see you,
Thank you so
Patty.
much for coming
Wonderful
with us
to see you.
today. I said you wear a couple of really big hats. Fancy job now you've got. Kate went from, you've gone through like a series of positions from the Guam State Clearinghouse where you were helping find grant money for all of GovGuam agencies. And then I told you that you were going to be the deputy director of the Department of Corrections, best kept secret. But they appointed you to that position, so now here you are.
Here I am.
I did not ever think that I would see you in prison. I just, for some reason, that was not an area.
It's so strange because I was thinking about just sort of the course of my career and how it's all, I've been in the helping profession for a really long time, doing social services and really in youth and families for a very long time. And so the government was sort of a little bit of a break from that, and when I first started in the government, as you said, at the Guam State Clearinghouse, it was primarily, like you said, grants and monitoring compliance of grants in our line agencies. So that was kind of it was a challenge at first and kind of bumping along there for a while, sort of a steady hum, working for the Lieutenant Governor. Never a dull moment because he's like Mach 5 all the time, every day. So, I mean, really, it was a change that came, I think, at precisely the right time. And it was so neat when they called me. They said, "We have a position for you, and we think you're the right person to do it. Talk to your family." And in my mind, I'm thinking, what would I have to talk to my family about? I said, well, what agency is it? And they said, the Department of Corrections. And they were sort of like bracing themselves for my reaction. And I said, and without hesitation, I said, "You know what, Governor, I'll do it. I'll do it." And Lieutenant Governor said, "That is fantastic. Thank you for stepping up." And the Chief of Staff, Joe Duenas, was there. He was quiet most of the time, sort of, what is she going to say? But Patty, I have to tell you that it has been a wonderful experience. Not only working with Director Tony Lamorena, but all my staff, the corrections officers. It's such a wonderful camaraderie. And it's true. I mean, you see the law enforcement agencies and how it's very paternal, very brotherly, and how it's like a family. And from day one, I felt that at the Department of Corrections.
Well, the interesting thing is that it's really not a huge departure from what you've been trained in social work for. You're right there in the middle of, honestly, a petri dish of great experimental evaluation, right?
Precisely. And their reasoning for choosing someone like myself, even without having a law enforcement background, was that one, we needed to capture some federal monies, and they didn't have anyone there that was dedicated to doing that. So
Or knows how to write grants and that sort of thing. Is that it? Is
right,
that your
exactly.
expertise in grants?
There's lots of corrections monies out there, and a lot of some justice funds, a lot of partnership opportunities. If they could just find the person to get in there and get that job done. So in addition to that, our casework and counseling, which is my background, the casework and counseling unit needed a little beefing up. We have a wonderful casework and counseling supervisor, Teresa Tayama, who works so hard every single day. Our behavioral unit needed a little bit of beefing up as well, and support. And we have Dr. Patricia Timinglow, who's our psychologist. And it was basically for them just having a deputy, having another person there that understands that world, because it's easy to have somebody who understands law enforcement, criminal justice, the penal system, the judicial system. But on the other flip side of the coin, when you're talking about corrections, it's casework, rehabilitation, reentry, prison industries, a nonprofit organization that will help carry out those other things that don't typically fall in what you would think a prison does.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, a lot of people don't know what a prison does, and anybody who understands what a prison is, no one would ever use some of these words that you're describing, because it feels like you're talking about an entirely different GovGuam agency.
Doesn't it?
You are in one of the most dangerous environments on Guam, a collection of some of Guam's most violent criminals and people who have done really bad things in our community to other people. And that's a dangerous environment.
I thought about it at first, and my family, I think that was their concern, was your safety. How do we get past that you're going to be going to exactly what you talked about, going to this place where it's this concentrated in such a small, relatively small area, the most egregious things that people could do to another person or human being, these people have done. Murderers, rapists, pedophiles, burglars, people who commit assault, and things like that. And so, interestingly enough, and I get asked this all the time, and my colleagues at Adelup, they're all so curious, they're like, what, we're sending Kate? We're sending Kate to
one of the
DSC?
happiest, fuzzy Care Bear people to the most deviant environment on
Right.
the island.
They could-
were you going to kill them with kindness or
Right,
something?
and that is exactly what I have had to do.
Yeah.
Is kind of, and Director Tony said, you have to remember that these folks made a mistake, and they made this mistake in this time in their lives. And sure, they're serving time, but part of the goal of corrections, the mission of corrections, isn't just warehousing people, keeping the lights on, keeping them fed. It's how do you get, hopefully, with all your effort, how do you get this person to get from where they were when they committed that crime to being a productive member of society?
Well, I guess that's the concept. I mean, it is a corrections department. It's not a penitentiary.
It's not a penitentiary.
Well, and there is a difference.
Certainly.
Okay, so you want to explain the difference?
Well, I mean, in essence, part of our challenge is, and I've spoken about this before, is that there are institutions in the United States where the entire facility is one classification, all max, or all triple C, right? Community corrections, which is like our halfway house residents. And in Guam, because we're such a small population, and just by virtue of how the facility was designed, everybody's there. Detainees are there, pretrial detainees are there, the females are there, which in some places is completely unheard of. I mean, you would be in an all-male facility, and the female facility might be 40 miles down the road, But we have everyone. So how do we meet the needs of so many different classifications and so many different people, walks of life? You'd be surprised of the folks that we have in there. They're not all sort of the what we would like to think, although by and large they are. I mean, you're talking about low socioeconomic status, people from families who were disenfranchised from the beginning. But there are also folks in there who for some reason, who came from some affluent families or came from families who never had a criminal history in their life and find themselves having committed this crime and are now with us. So there's a broad spectrum of folks, and we have to meet their needs every day.
So the idea isn't that you're treating every single person there in one same kind of, they're all, you lay out some kind of hope that that they can be rehabilitated,
Yes.
as opposed to punished for their crimes.
Precisely. Otherwise, you're spinning your wheels. If you're not going to do anything to help them, it's such a like liberal concept,
Well, it's been around for a while. I mean, this has been the mission of. It used to be the OCCC. Remember that?
Yes.
And then, now they don't call it that anymore. And a lot of people don't even necessarily refer to it as a prison.
No, in some institutions, it's not even called a prison or a corrections facility. It's a therapeutic community.
Yeah, exactly. So
yes.
that in itself. I wonder what the people's take is on that. When they hear this kind of language, because society can be very, very hard on these
Yes.
criminals.
Yes.
Send them away, lock the door, throw away the key. They have the mentality that you should be punished for the rest of your life and never see the light of day. And the community doesn't sign on all the time to the concept of, let's try to fix these people so that we can send them back and try to be productive members of the society.
It's true.
Yeah, okay.
There are people that I'm going to tell you. I mean, there are some inmates there that they don't care one way or another.
Yeah.
If they sit in the same cell for the next 30 years, 50 years, makes no difference to them. But for the most part, and in the beginning, I had just no concept. I think that's kind of the good part is I didn't have any preconceived notions except for what you see on TV is what a jail looks like, But like today, for example, when I went to Mass and I sat among them, and I was the only female there except for our security detail, and Teresa Tayama, our supervisor. I never once felt fear. I never felt fear for my life, because when you think about it and you look at them and you talk to them and you find out, and not at length, but you see the human aspect of who they are. I mean, certainly there are recidivists.
Yeah.
There's folks that are just, they just keep doing it over and over again.
Right.
And then there's the folks that, for that moment in time, they made a really terrible decision. And they're paying for it.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then other things when we come back. For now, we're going to take a real quick break and come back with our guest, Kate Baltazar from the Department of Corrections. We'll be right back. Back with Kate Baltazar from the Department of Corrections, and I wanted to just sort of round out the thoughts that you had about that, the difference between a correctional facility and a penitentiary. But you are also still dealing with the same kind of trappings of a penitentiary. Right now, you're on the thick of just trying to control the flow of contraband, which is that's a problem. It always has been. And so how are you controlling it? It sounds like you guys are doing a much better job.
It's a really huge task, and it was very daunting in the beginning. I think you asked me that once, did you know when you signed on before you started that you were going to have to take this on? And it was one of the things that, not just the public outcry, but families, it was no secret, the contraband that was being trafficked. And so just one day, I think my first couple of days there, I talked to Tony La Morena, and I said, 01, I want you to know that I support you in all of the things that you do. And, you know, we might have differences in opinion, but you're the visionary here. And he truly is. He has a vision for the prison. And he said, well, one of the things, aside from prison industries and the rehabilitation and beefing up those units, is we've got to get a hold of the contraband, because that has been a long-standing issue. And we're not sure to what extent it's been addressed or if it's been addressed. But for you and I, that's going to be a priority, because that is, it goes so much deeper than most people understand. You know, and I think that most people would think, well, you're just scratching the surface. You know, all these you know, 30 grams here of meth and so on and so forth. But to me, that's 30 grams less that I have to deal with on an inmate in his cell. You know, and so we got together. Our internal affairs section, they are just by far, I mean, they're the backbone of what I do every day. I mean, apart from the casework and behavioral stuff, this is the kind of stuff, by virtue of being the deputy director, you can't turn your back from. And they support the director and I so much. And so Lieutenant Jeff Limo is a godsend from, I mean, just his advice, his experience. I mean, he's been a corrections officer almost 30 years. So he has seen and knows the ins and outs and is able to help guide us in our decisions.
What's the deeper issue than what appears to the naked eye, as you say, on contraband?
Well, most people suspected that it was an inside job. And there are things even for me that I am not always made aware of, just for my own safety. I know, like, after the fact. But it's just like when they got tipped off when one of our officers, that was a very highly publicized thing in the media, when it was one of our officers who's probably one of the biggest mules bringing in the contraband, you know, in a Pop-Tart box. That just blew my mind, because we often think of the enemy as someone outside, somebody who is, you know, doing some sort of, you know, clandestine operation, throwing it over the fence.
Yeah.
But when you find out it's one of your own and it's the enemy from within, that just shakes everyone in a totally different way.
Sure.
Because
you have too many enemies out there to have to think that you're among one.
Exactly. And I mean, and then I get asked, don't you do bag checks? Don't you do? Of course we do. We do all of that. Bag checks, vehicle checks now. Pat downs,
yeah.
we do, you know, we're partnering with Customs for the canines, but they'll always find a way, and every prison in America has this problem. You know, I think we talked about the drones the one time, but the thing that I think is most disappointing and hurtful is when it is one of your own, because you have cycle mates in there, you have guys that you've served with in there on downrange, on platoon, you know, night after night, you know, protecting the public, and yet here you are now, public enemy number one. I mean, that shakes us, you know.
I want to move into something else, because we have a limited time to get through this, like maybe 5 minutes left in the show. You are also one of the Republican Party officials on Guam.
Yes.
What is your exact role?
I'm the secretary.
The secretary,
Yes.
Okay, for the Republican Party of
The
Guam.
Republican Party of Guam.
And this is a really tough time to be a Republican, wouldn't you say?
It is.
I mean, we've had Republican presidents before, in the Bushes and the Reagans, but nothing as critical as the Republican Party today at this time in a Trump administration.
I think that after the election, and even before the election, I think most folks know, you know, the governor supported Ted Cruz first. We were the Ted Cruz, and then, you know, Ted Cruz didn't make it, and we threw all of our support behind President Trump. I started as a Rubio girl. I was a Marco Rubio camp, you know, and of course Ted Cruz. But I think that now that we've been able to get some distance from it, and all the emotions and everything that went into the good and bad things that happened immediately after the presidential election. What we are focusing now as a party is progress. How do we move, I mean, locally? Not that we're not paying attention nationally, because there's a lot of things that happen nationally, God knows, that affect us locally.
Well, sure, but and you have to not align yourself with some of the more controversial orders that have come from the president, and you have to align yourself with some of the controversial orders that have come from the president,
Right.
because some of the things that he's talking about, Eddie Cavill has been doing.
Yes.
With compact, not necessarily the compact impact citizens, but those among us whose cases were commuted or sentences were commuted and they were
Absolutely.
booted. So there's immigration issues that we have, but beyond that, all of Republicans right now are being painted with the same brush.
Yes.
It feels very black or white. It really does. It feels very Trump or not Trump, which is Democrat or Republican. I don't know how you view that necessarily or personally, and that would be none of my business. But the politics of it is the politics of it. But it has also seeped into some of our personal friendships.
Absolutely.
And we start to look at each other as being an enemy if you are with Trump, or part of the problem if you aren't.
And well, I think that for me, if there's good and bad for every president. But if we allow ourselves to become divided by the not so desirable things that the president has done, then those not desirable things win. We have to now more than ever support one another, love each other, know where we are personally. And I think that's one of the great things about what has happened here is that this president has shaken us individually and collectively so much that we are looking so much more introspectively than we ever have.
Well, you have to, because everybody is putting up their guard in self-defense.
Yes.
And so I think that we talked about this, whether you are a Trump girl or a Rubio girl or a Republican girl or a Democrat girl. I think the point is that in some of our friends and in some of these people who we've known for all our lives,
Yes.
we see this bitter pill
Yes.
in defense of him.
Sure.
So I don't really care what your politics is, but if you're going to cast aspersions on people that are kind or religions or single out people to hate by color or religion, I have a problem with that.
I have
How
a
are
huge
we
problem
friends
with that.
ever?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, and it's so unfair to say that, well, Kate, you're a Republican, therefore you must subscribe to every single thing that Trump, puts out.
Do you find yourself defending your
all the time? And I've kind of, stopped doing it. I've just said I can't be defensive.
That's why I really have a hard time.
You almost have to carry a list. I like this about Trump. I don't like this about Trump. And I'm just going to pass it out at all of our parties beforehand so that we can just know where we all are.
Yeah.
And
okay, so last question. Then Ray Tenorio is running for governor.
Yes.
Okay.
Excited about
Who's he
that.
running with?
We are still in the exploratory.
Okay.
As you know, he's my governor. So
So the line is already drawn. Do you have another Republican candidate that's rising somewhere?
not to our knowledge at this time.
So
no.
if you want to, you know who to call. She's a secretary. And she's my friend, and she is a Republican. So look how that happens. The world can still go around. Not that I'm a Democrat. It's just the world just still goes around with people who have
It
differences.
still goes around.
Yeah.
Just be a good human, I always say.
Just be a good human. Wise words for the Lenten season. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you,
Kate
Patty.
Baltazar, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on the radio.